Hamas, I don't want to say took advantage or decided to, at the last 2 days of the Ramadan, this year actually Jerusalem Day and the Ramadan actually fell one on the other. And while we were in Jerusalem celebrating Jerusalem Day, something there made them decide that they want to shoot rockets towards Jerusalem, something that never happened, let's say, in the last few decades, especially not from Gaza. And I'm not talking about wars in the past. And it's something that had never happened. And it's rockets shot at our capital. Israel then began a defensive campaign against a terror organization in the Gaza Strip, if it's the Hamas, if it's the Palestinian Jihad organization. But really, while mitigating harm to non-combatants, that's for sure. Israel's main goals in this operation that took 10 to 11 days was bringing an end to any imminent threat to the Israeli civilians and re-establishing their security in Israel. The second thing was weakening and deterring Hamas and any other terror organization in the Gaza Strip. When I say weakening, there was no thought of now going in and trying to do something that's going to actually disarm and get them disarmed fully, because it wasn't one of our missions, but it was to bring them to a level that they cannot react for, let's say, 10 years and even more. And I'll talk about it now during my presentation. The Hamas and the Jihad, the Palestinian Jihad terror infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, I got to say, suffered a severe blow, including the elimination of senior leadership, commanders and operatives, destruction of a subterranean infrastructure that, from my opinion, and I've seen it and I was there in 2014, it's the heart of the Hamas military abilities was that subterranean infrastructure. And it wasn't eliminated, but it was harmly, let's say, it got a very severe blow, and it will be very hard, or for many years now, trying to build that back up. And that's how the Hamas and the Jihad, that's how they hid their leadership. They used to move from one point to another. They used to hide. Not to be overground, but to be underground was something that they understood, that they wanted it more. But now they've got a very big difficulty there. And it's something that we did in a very precision strikes and intelligence, something that we never did before. And I think it was a very big success. Military facilities, headquarters, and many terrorist office buildings were shot down. Leadership houses, who mostly or mainly were as headquarters or for hideouts, were destroyed, and also that was done in a very how do you say, precision way. And sometimes I translate from Hebrew to English, so excuse my stuttering a bit. The IDF throughout the whole operation acted according with international law in a responsible and a restrained manner, and had made immense effort to mitigate harm to non-combatant while defending Israeli civilians. And that sometimes is very difficult to show outside, but I'm telling you also as the community, it's something that as a military officer, it's part of my list when I get ready for any kind of operation. It's something that I do all the time, and it's something that we take in mind. And sometimes missions are cancelled, or things are cancelled if there's civilians that we understand might be harmed, but we do everything to achieve our mission and everything to see that nobody who's not supposed to be harmed will be harmed. While the IDF targeted terror in only enemy military facilities, the Hamas and the Jihad hide in hospitals, shoot rockets out of civilian and populated areas, using the Palestinians as human shields. the Hamas shot over 4,000 rockets to Israel cities, towns, settlements. 13 Israelis were killed. 1 soldier and 12 civilians, including children, minority and migrant workers, and over 100 that were injured. All those rockets that were shot and all those issues that we had, the IDF responded with precise or precision strikes on terror targets. And I don't want to say the exact numbers, but when you hear 4,000 rockets and even more that were shot to Israel, I think 20% of that is what we used against our enemy, because we used it precisely on enemy targets, on military targets, and we don't shoot them just so we shoot and just so we'll make any harm to certain areas or facilities. When a building is brought down, it's a Hamas headquarters that is brought down, and it's not trying to just shoot all over. And I say we do it in a professional manner. The IDF used multi-domain operation capabilities on the offensive and defensive area to get maximum achievement on both aspects. To do so, the multi-domain operation concept is a very important ability that brings all our forces together and maximizes our ability to be precise, to be accurate, efficient in our missions, and in the battlefield and or in our home front borders. I can tell you that there are many operations or things that the Hamas or the Jihad try to do during these 11 days that weren't spoken or told about, but we prevented many attacks because of our border protection and because of the multi-domain operation capabilities, where we have the Air Force, the intelligence, the ground forces, the sensors. We have all kinds of abilities that help us prevent anything from happening, especially on our border, and helps us do whatever we need to do in the depth of the enemy territory. In order to ensure long-term peace and stability, Hamas, which strives against the Palestinian Authority and seeks to undermine the stability in Judah and Samaria and control in a manner contrary to Israeli interests, the region, and the international community, they must be weakened. And that was our main thing that we try to do, is weaken them as much as we can. But IDF does it mainly military-wise, and the 11 days, we were trying to weaken them as much as we can, especially military-wise, facility, armament, whatever they got there is try and weaken them, as I said, as much as we can. Iran has a negative role in the region. And the negative role reflects in Hamas operational perception, capabilities, and its aggression. And you can see it. Not everything is because the Hamas leadership decided. There's a lot of influence from what's happening around the world, especially from Iran. Abroad, regional and international efforts is needed to suppress the Iranian presence and its influence, and to address the effect of intensification and proliferation. And it's something that we need the help from the international, the international and the regional community. The confrontation in Gaza is a scale model of a possible confrontation in Lebanon. That everybody has to understand. With Hamas arsenal about 1/10 of the Hezbollah, so you understand what the Hezbollah might have. The expected destruction and casualties in a war in Lebanon will be unprecedented, and every effort must be made to prevent it. And first of all, work to implement the decision of the UN Security Council and to prevent further intensification of Hezbollah, which encourages it to escalate. And that's what they're trying to do, let's say, from far. And if we'll get into it, we won't find ourselves in a bit of a difficult era. I don't want to talk about specifics. The questions that you might give me later, I'll answer them, and I'll give any specifics that I can. But I can say that the IDF, and I'm not saying now Israel, the government, I'm talking about what the IDF got a mission. The mission was to prevent the shooting on civilians and on settlements and towns and cities. I'm saying Iron Dome did a terrific job. Our protecting the borders, we did a perfect job. But still, even though all of that, we had millions of civilians during 11 days in bomb shelters and under attack. And it's something that we really can't, how do we say, can't have that on an ongoing daily basis. So we did all that we can to weaken, harm the military abilities of the Hamas and the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I can't talk about numbers, and I can't talk about what specifically, but I can say, and I'm not saying it just so, I'm saying it from here to you so you'll have a good feeling. I'm saying there was really done a very good job during this last operation. We can always do better. There's a lot of things that we didn't do that well, but a very good job in weakening, in hitting leadership, hitting the main core of the Hamas military and armament abilities, and bringing them back, let's say 8 to 10 years. So they'll now have to think again what they want to do and how they want to go forwards. We're always looking for peace, but I'm saying on the military side, we are here to protect, and we are here to do all we can to protect and prevent any future conflicts, casualties, and anything else that can happen in Israel. On a personal note, I can say that all I said here today shows the importance of a strong IDF and how important it is that we have a strong government, but a strong military ability that will know how to really do whatever the government tells us to do and to achieve any achievement that we are needed. So a strong IDF, strong soldiers, strong units, and strong commanders. And we get that out of the belief and the understanding that, as we say in Hebrew, she'en lanu eretz acheret, and that if not us, then no one will do what we have to do. So I really want to say, first of all, thank you very much for your support. It's needed. Your voice is needed. The rest we'll do. So thank you very much. And really thanks for letting me talk. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I want to just say also that the Lone Soldier Foundation is an amazing foundation. I'm saying it as an ex-battalion commander that I had tens of lone soldiers. And just for you to know, when a lone soldier knows that he's got a quiet place at home because somebody supports him, somebody helps him, and he doesn't have to think about when he's going home now, will he have a towel, or will he have does he have a soap or shampoo now to shower at home, because in the army he always has it. And so I just can tell you that all your support and your help helps them help the IDF, because they do a much better job, and they feel protected when they in the base, and they feel safe when they come home for the weekend or wherever they are. So really, thank you very much. And as we say, Am Yisrael Chai. Toda Rabba.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Oken. That was for not just this informative talk, but also for, without even us talking about it, you provided me with the perfect lead-in for our next speaker, So our next speaker is Avi Lurie. He's a veteran lone soldier from Philadelphia who served as a commander and a sharpshooter in paratroopers. So Avi, if you will take over, please.
Thank you, Stacy. So before I start, just 3 quick thank yous. First to Lieutenant Colonel who's here with us today. Thank you for being here with us. To the foundation for hosting this. And as I say every time, to make sure I see them, there we are, Mark and Harriet Levin, the parents of Michael Levin. They will be speaking soon. But each time before I speak, it's just extra important to make it known that the reason I'm sitting where I am today and doing what I'm doing today is because of Michael's story and because of the support that Mark and Harriet are able to give. It's just very important for me to say. So, as Stacy said, I was in the 809th Battalion of the Paratroopers, and I was there from 2014 to 2017. Instead of speaking about my time in the Army and what it was like to be a lone soldier, I want to speak about what it was like to be out of the Army and to look back on the individuals that are following in those footsteps that I left behind. When I got out of the Army, there were two major goals that I had that I wanted to do. One was to work for organizations that directly and tangibly give back to lone soldiers. And on the other side, I wanted to educate young Americans or young anywhere from abroad coming to Israel, educate them on what it was that Israel was about. I'll speak in just a little bit about the first half of working with organizations that help soldiers. What was really interesting was speaking to the groups of the people from abroad coming to Israel. And it always came down to a very, very similar talk point. And it's that the fight for Israel and the fight to keep her alive is split between two fronts. There's the front within Israel, the one that Lieutenant Colonel spoke to us about just now. And then there's also the front from outside of Israel, including everyone who's here on this call and the thousands of others around the world. When I speak to the groups and I say that it's truly half-half, I mean that it's truly half-half. The people who are abroad, who are supporting Israel from abroad, there are two major ways that this happens. One is to support by helping and doing, and the other one is to support by giving. What do I mean when I say support by doing? During the last operation with the thousands of rockets raining down, although I'm not in a position anymore inside the Army to do the work that the military does, which I can only imagine what Lieutenant Colonel was doing during this conflict, personal note, thank you, I could support from an outside perspective. I could use the new tool of social media that seems to be everyone has to do my part in giving back and continuing to defend Israel. My social media is always full of pro-Israel activism, but during the last conflict, it was different. While I was sitting in the shelter in Tel Aviv with my friends, while I was having rockets fired at me, not precision strikes like we spoke about, but with the intention to kill Israelis, including myself, I was sitting there and I was receiving messages of threats that I won't repeat because I can't use the language that was used online. I was threatened, my family, my friends, people I didn't even know were being threatened. There was so much anti-Semitism that was going on at that moment. But in that moment, I saw a little bit of a light. Through all of those awful things that I saw a student of mine from 7 years ago posting on an Instagram account that had over 15,000 followers about what was really going on and the support from abroad. I have a friend who's a platoon commander in Golani, in a different combat unit. While they were at the border waiting for the next command of what they were to do next, he said every morning he'd open up her account, my old student, look at the videos, look at the pictures of support from abroad, and he would tell the soldiers, if God forbid we have to go into battle, this is the support that you have behind you. He said that was a direct, tangible difference in giving motivation to the soldiers on the ground. A perfect example of where the 50% of the soldiers on the ground and the people abroad beautifully come in harmony. That's the doing. And then there's the giving. And then there's the being a lone soldier. When I try to think of how to describe what giving to the foundation is, I finally found out how to best put it. The foundation helps organizations that focus on individual soldiers as individuals. Every lone soldier comes from a different background. a different family, a different set of needs, a different culture, a different this, a different that. And these organizations take that individual and see him or her as a true individual, as a lone soldier. I sat on my porch last week thinking about what story I was going to tell to get the point across. And I have I have in front of me three pages of stories, and I just don't have the time for the three. It bounces off from an organization finding me when I was in the middle of the field, in the middle of training, to unfortunately tell me that my grandfather had passed away, to take me in a car and bring me back to base so I could see his funeral on FaceTime. Something that if that didn't happen, I don't know, A, if I'd forgive myself, or B, I'd continue on my way. And then I thought about a soldier, that same soldier that I just told you about, who opened up the Instagram account, who gave the support to Golani on the border. One of the organizations found her in a park with no apartment, with no food, with nothing. Within a day, we had her in an apartment with food. Within a month, she was in the army. 4 years later, an intelligence officer. 7 years later, she's now defending Israel and continuing it from abroad. And then I also thought about the moments where you walk into your house after a loud week on base and it's quiet. And then you realize it's a little bit too quiet for you. And you start to think, what am I doing here? You start to feel alone. But all of a sudden, a friend that you met at one of these organizations texts you and says, I'm on the way to your house. And all of a sudden you snap out of that and you say, this is why I'm here. Or about the holidays, where before I knew about any of these organizations that help lone soldiers like they do tangibly, I volunteered to close Passover on base because I had nowhere to go when all the Israelis were running to their families. Or the Shabbat dinners, where I come home and I have no food in my fridge. And I make it right before Shabbat starts because something happened on base and I have no food. And I call somebody and they say, I'll help you out. Or the 4 a.m. calls or the 5 a.m. calls, where if I call a number and I need help, I'm going to get help. The only reason these types of stories are able to happen to me and to the thousands of other lone soldiers are simply because of the organization that the foundation supports. There's one-on-one, it's individual, and from my experience of being in the army, being outside the army, and still being in Israel, I am still seeing the effect that it has. That's what I mean when I say that the fight is half and half. There are the soldiers on the ground in Israel, and there are the soldiers that are abroad. It's like a car. The soldiers might be the exterior. They take bumps, we take bruises, but you're all the engine. And the engine is also what helps to keep the car going and what enables us to be able to do the job that we do. So on a personal note, to anyone on the call and to anyone who speaks and to defends Israel in any way that you do, personally, thank you. Thank you to Lieutenant Colonel for speaking with us today and giving us a military eye of what it was like during the operation. To Stacy for hosting this, and to the foundation for making this possible. And of course, to Mark and Harriet.
Thank you so much, Avi. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak. And of course, for your leadership as a lone soldier and both during and after your service. We're privileged today to have Mark and Harriet Levin with us. As a lone soldier parent, I can't imagine how they were able to take such a tragedy in their life and turn it into something so positive, something that helps all lone soldiers, including my own sons. So now I want to turn this over to Mark and Harriet.
So before Mark goes to all his points that he has written down, Stacy, thank you for putting everything together. Colonel Oken for your time. And Avi Lurie, just like you always thank us, I'm going to tell you like I always do, I wish I had a daughter for you to be part of our family. I love you.
My turn?
Now it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stacy. Let me begin by saying that Harriet has given me permission to speak for both of us today, which is a rare occasion. But
I'm here to correct him.
We'd like to express our sincere thanks to Avi Lurie, to Lieutenant Colonel Oken, to the Israeli Embassy in Washington, who was very, very helpful in setting up this program and cooperating with us. And most of all, we'd like to thank everyone who was interested enough this morning to set aside enough time to join us for the Zoom presentation. It's hard to believe that 15 years have passed since the Second Lebanon War. For those of you who don't know, I believe there were 119 IDF casualties during that war, and our son Michael was the first paratrooper and the only American to fall in that conflict. And back then, the term Chayal Boded, lone soldier, was just something that was, as I like to say, under the radar. I said before that there was a very, very prominent rabbis who came up to us after Michael's passing and said that they were embarrassed to tell us that they had never, ever heard of the term lone soldier. It was something that just, they know there are people who went to Israel and they did what they did, and, but it was something that was just, it was never really talked about here in this country. But a lot has happened in those 15 years. The understanding, the awareness, and most important, the appreciation of lone soldiers in those 15 years it's now at an all-time high. A lone soldier can probably knock on any door in Israel and just tell them who he is and where he's from, that he's a lone soldier and he doesn't have anywhere to go for Shabbos, and they'd invite him in and feed him and clothe him if necessary, and he could stay as long as he wants. A lot has changed, but the most important thing that has changed is that there has been the establishment, as many of you know, of several lone soldier facilities and organizations in Israel that we, as a U.S. foundation, financially support. It was Michael's idea, it was Michael's dream, his vision, to have an organization like this be established in Israel, because he faced many, many problems that Israeli soldiers do not face, and I won't go into all of them now. But his thought was, when he finished the service, that he, along with a friend of his, were going to start a lone soldier organization in Israel to cater to the needs of lone soldiers, as Stacy said, before, during, and after the service. And that's exactly what happened. A year or two after Michael's passing, it began just on a small little budget, a couple of people with our help. And 15 years later, there are a number of organizations in Israel that the Michael Levin Lone Soldier Foundation here in this country, our 501c3, financially support. But we cannot support these organizations without your help. We receive absolutely no money whatsoever from the Israeli government. We are solely dependent upon the private and institutional donations of people here in this country to fulfill all of our financial grant requests that come over from the centers in Israel. The fundraising that we do is absolutely vital to these organizations. My hope is that we can continue to depend on people like you and your generosity going forward. So let me just say that if you've enjoyed this program and gained further insight into Israel, into the IDF and the recent conflict with Hamas, I urge you to help us by clicking onto the donation link and making a contribution, because by doing so, you will not only be directly supporting the very soldiers that defend Israel, but at the same time, go a long way in honoring the blessed memory of our son, Michael. Thank you very, very much. And may God bless the nation of Israel.
Amen.
Stacy, I'll take this back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Harriet. I think one of the things that I just want to reiterate is that the brave young men and women who serve as lone soldiers also serve as ambassadors to Israel around the world. I mean, lone soldiers come from almost every country And they really do serve as ambassadors to Israel. Just as Avi mentioned, I can tell you that even personally, my sons have spoken, as Avi has, at universities to college students, encouraging them, if they already support Israel, but also to engage with other people who don't necessarily support Israel, but don't fully understand exactly how the IDF operates, as Lieutenant Colonel Oken mentioned, in the most humane way, not targeting civilians, but precision targeting of military targets, which is not what Hamas is doing to Israel. So I just wanted to emphasize that, supporting lone soldiers is supporting our ambassadors all over the world, and is helping suppress, I hope, anti-Semitism and also support Israel. So I have a couple of questions. Lieutenant Oken, there's a couple specifically for you. One is that there's a lot of misperceptions about Israel and its history and how it came to be. And Israel doesn't do a great job about promoting itself. What efforts are being taken to get these false perceptions out of the media and correct perceptions in?
That's a good question, but it's a very good question. Not on my, I could say it's not my section. I can only say that I agree. I agree that we got to be better in that. It's something that we're not doing that well, and sometimes our enemies are doing it better than us. And we got to see how we do it. I can't really say how we're going to do it and how we're going to do it better and how things, because it's really not my section, and it things that I prefer not to give my opinion on how to do it. I can just say that I agree. It's something that we have to do a bit better. I think we understand that we have to do a bit better. We try and do it. I say during the last conflict, 11 days, me as an IDF officer, and especially someone that works with the US Army, so I can give them and all the representatives here the right information and the right understanding. So there's a lot of information and all kind of movies and clips that were done to, and they were also distributed out on YouTube and all kind of social media and things like that. I think we got to know how to do it in a wider and a broader way. We are the land of technology, and we are the land of, and we're just doing it not as well as other people that are less capable than what we are. But that's the most I can say, because it's not really my section. I'm sorry.
No, I think you also answered one of the other questions, which was how do we help to neutralize anti-Semitism online? And I think that is by being proactive and telling positive stories in our own social media arenas, our own personal social media arenas. And, I think, thank you, I appreciate that. I have a second question for you. Actually, a few questions for you, but someone wanted to know, is KEVA, that is the extension of service for soldiers, growing as a need to provide for experienced commanders?
I don't know who asked the question, but when they say, just for understanding also, I just hope growing, that means more numbers, or growing that means more people want to do it. That's what I'm saying. So if it's,
I think probably, are there more, is there a greater need for soldiers to sign on more time to serve as experienced commanders? This being a relatively young, in terms of age, army.
I think the way we do it today, the KEVA, it won't change. The numbers are the numbers, and what we need, I can say that what we need, we get. It's not that we are in, we don't seek for them, and we need them and they don't come. we got the right, how do you say, the right process of finding the right people. We've got the right people with the right abilities. I think today our leadership are really the best of what we have today in Israel. And I think that the Keva model is a very, very good model, that it helps us, even though it's a young age. But take myself, when I was 19 years old, I was already a sergeant. When I was 20 years old, I was already an officer. When I was 22 years old, I was a company commander. But everybody goes through certain positions, and I can say, and also today was a perspective of what's happening in the US Army. And I see that an officer, he's got no experience. He goes through 4 years of studies and he becomes an officer. In Israel, you have to be a soldier. And because of where we are and the region and what's happening on our borders, everybody's got experience all the time. You've got experience in combat, you've got experience in conflict, you've got experience in leadership, you've got experience in all kind of difficult situations in combat or not in combat. And everybody goes through certain positions until they come to Keva. So I think we've got the right model that brings the right people with the right experience to lead the companies, the battalions, the brigades, and at the end, the whole of the IDF to achieve the missions and to do whatever they have to do in the best way possible.
In order to help us fight anti-Semitism here, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the lengths at which the IDF goes to minimize its civilian casualties, not just in this operation, but in past operations as well.
Well, as I said, it's, if I've got a list of things that I do before I go into operation. So one of them, intelligence, civilian intelligence, and understanding what's happening in the area of operation. And when I have to, why do I have to understand what's happening in the area of the operation? If I'm operating in enemy territory, let's call it, then I don't have to think too much. That's where I'm operating. And if I'm operating there, it's because I need to, because there's enemy, because there's enemy military facilities that I've got to get to, because there's something that I've got to find or got to do, or something that I have to catch or I have to eliminate. So why do I have to know what's happening around civilian and the population and what's happening there? But the reason is because we always check to see that there's no civilians or people that don't have to, we want to minimize casualties that are not militant and are not enemy. So that's something that we always check and always do. And as I said before, there were missions that we aborted, that we canceled, because we understand that there's something that we need to do, but if we do it, people will be injured or people will be killed that we don't want them to be killed. Now, sometimes we do have people that are killed, and it's done not because we wanted it to do it, that's because sometimes there's miscalculation, and sometimes there are also decision making. Sometimes in the decisions that you have to make, that you understand that maybe there will be, but it's a high value target or things like that, but that's on the end scale. Mostly, we will cancel a mission if we understand that there are going to be civilians that are going to be injured. We will cancel a mission if we understand that we might achieve it, but won't achieve it in fully, because achieving a mission is when we do it perfectly. You will not achieve a mission if at the end you have people killed or injured, civilians that you didn't want them to be killed or injured, and they were not supposed to be there or not supposed to be part of that operation. So I'm saying, what people don't understand is when now the Air Force is going to hit a building and they hear that they shoot something to give it's not only that, we shoot a dummy rocket that will hit the building and will tell everybody in the building that understand this building is targeted. It's an enemy building, get out. We make phone calls, we know how to phone all of them, and we know how to get to all of those houses, or to the, let's say, the householders and the landlords or whoever is responsible, to tell them, get everybody out. we sometimes supposed to 8 o'clock hit a building down, and it will be postponed because not everybody's out the building. And we understand that it will take them a bit of time, and we'll even wait. And only when we understand that everybody's outside that building or everybody's outside the area of operation, then we will operate. So you must understand that sometimes we put ourselves in a harm's way, let's say, because if I go into operation and I don't do what I have to do on time, it will actually put my soldiers maybe in harm's way. And sometimes those are the things that we do because we want to prevent casualties on the other side. So there's so many things that we do. I can say during 2014, when I was a battalion commander, we flew out flyers, or if that's the right word to say in English, pamphlets that we write in Arabic and in English, saying that this is what we're doing and this is the operation, and it's not here to harm any civilians. We're here just to do whatever we have to do against the enemy or whoever's trying to harm Israel and the Israeli civilians. So there's all kinds of things that we do when we're talking to the Palestinian civilians, the Palestinians that are not supposed to be part of this conflict, and we don't want them to be part of this conflict. And I can say it truthfully. As a battalion commander, there were a lot of operations that we saw civilians, and we stopped our maneuver while we were maneuvering into the Gaza Strip because we had to see that the civilians were getting out first, and then we continued. And it's something that at the end, you're leaving your soldiers or your units vulnerable to enemy attack while you're doing that. But it's something that we have to do because that's our moral compass and that's how we operate. And the truth is, that's how I would want anybody to operate when I'm thinking about a large-scale war. And if we're there, I would want it to be military to military and not civilian to civilian or military to civilian, because that's the right thing to do, and that's how we operate. So I hope that answered it as much as I can.
I think that was an outstanding, that's outstanding information for us all to have, because that's not something that's really publicized, at least not here in the US, in major media markets. And it's good information for us to be able to use in speaking with people to better inform them about how Israel operates. And thank you, I appreciate that. So what is the feeling in terms of how is Israel aware of the growing anti-Semitism around the world, especially in the United States? And a little tangential to that is, you know, our IDF soldiers being told about how they might also counter anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic rhetoric should they encounter it.
So first of all, we understand that. We felt it also in this past conflict, even more than we felt it during any other conflict or any other times that we had all kind of issues. But I mean, we also felt it, and I don't want to get into it, but we also felt it internal in Israel. We felt it much more, and we understand that there's I don't want to say, we understand that there's maybe a bigger threat inside than just outside, and we got to know how to take care of that also. But soldier-wise and military-wise, we don't talk to our soldiers about anti-Semitism and things like that. We just talk to them about the understanding of where we live, where we are, where we operate. And when I say where we operate, it's not in the enemy territory. It's where we operate. We operate in Israel. We operate on our borders. We operate. We also have our issues with our Israeli settlements and the Israeli civilians. Sometimes we have issues with the Arabs in the Judah and Samaria. We have issues also while we in Jerusalem with the Israeli Arabs. Abroad, outside, it's not something that we talk to the soldiers. In Israel, we just talk to them to understand that there's all kind of danger also while you in Israel, and everybody understands that, and we try to bring that to their understanding. Also, the way they operate when they out of uniform, or when they operate when they're in uniform but not on their missions now, and what we expect out of them. And if we're talking about abroad and in America, all over the world, so first of all, we got our military representatives all over, just like me, and we try and give them the right messages to also spread around and spread out wherever they are posted, and that is part of our mission. Also to our counterpartners, and also to whoever we can and whoever we interact with while we are doing our positions here overseas. So we always, and I get it every week, and we get it from Israel, and we get it from the IDF or from the government, but we give all the right notes and messages that we want to bring out and give out, and the understanding of what's happening in Israel, and to give it out to our partners, or to whoever we have interaction with. So it's something that we do, and I can say also this: we got to do it much better. We still got to do it much more. You know, it's a difficult position for us as Israel overseas, or as Israelis, and especially as Israeli military officers overseas. But not only for us. I'm talking about Israel as Israel, the consulate, the embassy, whoever. We got to do it a bit more. We're doing it as much as we can, but it's just like the same as the other question, the question before. We got to do it better. We got to do it more. We got to do it smarter. We got to know how to do it. And I think after this past 11 days, there's a better understanding of that. And I think that we're going to see how from now forwards, there's going to be a bit of a difference, a good difference in the way we're going to give our message out, and the way we're going to do things.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Oken. I think that's actually the perfect way for us to end this program. I want to thank you for being with us and for giving us so much great information for us to follow up with you know, on our personal social media, with our friends and family, to help further explain not just why we love Israel, but what Israel is doing for us in terms of being there, being our homeland, and that we really do need to defend her, just as the IDF and our lone soldiers are defending her. I want to thank also Mark and Harriet for being here, and for Avi Lurie also for speaking. I want to thank Greg Haber, one of our board members, who really helped us put this together. And I want to thank everybody who was able to participate, come online and listen. And we appreciate you, you taking a little bit of time in your Sunday morning, all of you, to be with us. Thank you so much.